Watch this.
Idaho's budgeting committee has a lot of responsibility, approving allocations of our tax dollars. Lawmakers were back at the Capitol on a June morning to talk about a suggested mechanism, performance-based budgeting. A death sentence handed down this past week has us answering questions about the cost and availability of lethal injection drugs for a possible execution in Idaho.
It was literally field-to-field fighting. You know, I've heard it called street fighting too. It's house-to-house, field-to-field, and that's literally what it was.
On this day in 1944, Operation Neptune was a go on the beaches of Normandy. D-Day, as the world knows it today. In France, the American soldiers are still celebrated. Throughout the 2024 legislative session here in Idaho, there was a really interesting storyline to follow, one that involves all of us who pay taxes here in Idaho. The budgeting committee, JFAC, they undertook a major lift, creating a new process to be more transparent with budgeting because that budgeting is done with your tax dollars. Leaders of JFAC aim to dig into base budgets to make sure that money is being spent correctly and effectively. Budgeting leaders have said very clearly they don't want JFAC to be a rubber stamp committee. Certainly there are opinions across the board on how it went, and lawmakers are still working to improve the process. The ITD budget is a whole other related thing we can touch on another time, but JFAC met this morning to talk about an idea catching on in other areas, performance-based budgeting, and the Mountain States Policy Center helped walk them through it. In short, though, the concept sets up a meter of how tax dollars are spent based on a defined outcome for each specific agency. And that data, along with all other data that is pretty available in 2024, that would create a full sphere of information and would help create decisions for future budgeting. This isn't to say that money is being randomly allocated. It's not. It's the idea, though, that there is more defined and easily understandable metrics to follow in agency budgets. A lot of that work is already being done by the executive branch when they prepare the governor's recommended budget. The idea is now proposed, though, to have the legislative branch lock in with it, too. And we heard some fair concerns about the idea, great questions, and a general idea of where JFAC leaders want to see the conversation go. Take a listen.
To see that those funds are used in a way that really does accomplish what the citizens, the taxpayers, and all of us would hope would be accomplished. And not just some routine of give the money to an agency and just let them go for whatever they want to do. So there's a fine balance.
Now, it's up to the agency to decide how to measure what matters, to your point, right? I mean, one of the lessons I learned from No Child Left Behind, right? Back in 2002, standardized testing, 100% of kids were going to be able to read. We just had these goals. Well, it didn't work because we weren't measuring what mattered. A standardized test was not effective at helping us with our continuous improvement. Now, can they be a useful tool? Yes. Did they work in the way? No, they didn't. So that's why the executive branch will execute or implement the path to get here. But our job then comes in, and it won't be us telling them how to do that. It'll be them doing that. It will be us making the process, the performance-based aspect of their work to trying to get to those part of our process and institutionalizing that.
The prosecution had an overwhelming amount of evidence.
And we went through it. If someone had questions, we dove in, we found the answers, we found whatever supported where we were going, discussed, is there something that we didn't think of that would change our minds? So I'm very proud of the group that we had, that we did a thorough job and discussed everything. But as Roy mentioned, the prosecution put up a great case. And it made our decision, I don't want to say easy, but it pointed us in a direction pretty quickly.
We wanted to circle back on a few viewer questions that we didn't get to earlier this week when we heard from 6 of the jurors in the Chad Daybell trial after they sentenced him to death over the weekend for the murder of his first wife, Tammy, and 2 of his current wife's kids, JJ and Tylee. So let's get to some of the questions. One of you asked, can you describe specifics as to why Lori Vallow was ineligible for the death penalty? This is a popular question, and we've got a great answer for you. So in March of 2023, Judge Stephen Boyce ruled that Lori Vallow would not face the death penalty if she was convicted, which She was, and Boyce said at the time that the state prosecution disclosed evidence late, not in a malicious way, but in a way that could cause the case to be turned over on appeal if there was a capital conviction. In his ruling, actually, at the time, Boyce said, quote, "The court determines that the late disclosure of discovery has material prejudice, and the court is required to fashion a remedy that honors the fundamental right to a fair trial. As an appropriate discovery sanction, the state will be precluded from seeking the death penalty at trial." So there you go. And in July of last year, Lori Vallow was sentenced to 5 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. So a little bit of administrative reasoning for you, but that's why. Other questions for you. Peggy was wondering if Chad and his current wife, Lori, are they allowed to contact each other now that they're both in custody? So Lori Vallow Daybell is currently in an Arizona jail after she was extradited from the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center here in Idaho on November 29th of last year. Lori Vallow faces 2 additional charges of conspiracy to commit murder in Maricopa County, Arizona. This is related to the death of her former husband and the non-fatal shooting of another relative. So we reached out to the Idaho Department of Corrections to find out if she and Chad are allowed to contact each other. And here's what they said, a general answer that could apply. Per policy, resident-to-resident correspondence can be approved for residents who are immediate family members, are biological parents of a minor child, or when contact is related to legal work. If such correspondence was approved, it would be exempt from public records. Lori Vallow is scheduled to stand on trial for those additional charges in Arizona. We're expecting that to happen August of this year. Okay, another viewer wrote in to us asking, is there a variance in the cost to house a prisoner in general population versus a prisoner on death row? As you know, Chad Daybell is on death row. And the Idaho Department of Correction told us, quote, "We do not track housing costs by sentence type. However, the cost of incarceration depends on many factors and varies from facility to facility. For fiscal year 2023, the cost of incarceration at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, the facility that houses residents under the sentence of death, there was roughly $111 per day, or about $40,700 per year." Chad Daybell's death sentence makes him the 9th inmate that is currently on Idaho's death row. In a related question that we touched on last week quickly, the question's out there. Does the state of Idaho currently have lethal injection drugs to even carry out a death penalty? And the question that I saw from you was asked in relation to Chad Daybell, but to be honest, he likely won't face an actual death penalty for a very long time. The appeals process goes on for decades, maybe even longer. So this is a question that may be better tailored to current death row inmate Thomas Creech. Earlier this year, Idaho attempted a lethal injection on Creech, but failed to find a viable vein. The execution was called off. Still, though, the lethal injection drugs were prepared, and as our Morgan Romero reported in March, records show that the state of Idaho purchased 15 grams of pentobarbital, costing $50,000. But we learned that 2/3 of that pentobarbital is now unusable after syringes were prepared for Creech's execution. Therefore, the failed execution, it cost Idaho taxpayers about $33,000, and the remaining dose is set to expire in February of 2025. So they needed more. So did Idaho order more? How much did it cost? Well, we asked a few weeks ago, and public records I got back just today from the Idaho Department of Corrections show that the state of Idaho has spent $100,000 to buy 15 grams of pentobarbital. It's the same quantity as they purchased before, but it's now double the price. Idaho law really limits the information that we have to access about the purchase. The document you're looking at right now is basically all we know. So we don't know where the drug came from, like who it was bought from, when exactly it was bought, or where the exchange of money and drugs happened, or how did it happen. We do know that IDOC is ready if and when a death warrant is signed. A spokesperson wrote to me, per policy, we're obligated to practice and be ready for an execution even when there's no active death warrant. Specifically, the escort and medical team must train and rehearse for a minimum of 10 times a year to ensure readiness for carrying out an execution. IDOC goes on to say, we can confirm that we are in possession of chemicals necessary to carry out a death sentence by lethal injection.
good infantry, it's easy enough to tell. They put a pack on your back, send you straight to hell. Oh, highty-dighty. Who the hell are we? Rim Ram, 95th Infantry.
That is 101-year-old CEO Bauer of Ithaca, Michigan, a member of the 95th Infantry, later immortalized as the Iron Men of Metz after liberating that French city in November of 1944. Katrine McGregor, the woman that was sitting next to CO, he shared that video with us. And Katrine used to live in Boise, now lives in France, and was at the 80th anniversary of D-Day. The liberation of Metz and countless other French cities would not have happened without the initial invasion, the largest amphibious invasion in history on this day, June 6, 1944. There aren't many men left like CO, those that are amazing. They deserve our gratitude and our thanks. And those that aren't, well, they do too, which is what happened in one little French commune this week when they honored 2 Idahoans who helped push the Germans out of France.
For countless cities and small villages across northwestern France, there would be ceremonies to commemorate what happened 80 years ago today. A mayor will make a speech. Songs will be played. Wreaths will be placed. Dangy, France is no different.
Bonjour Dominique, vous allez bien?
Bonjour Patrick.
For Mayor Dominique Pin, Dangy's D-Day memories run deep.
For everybody in Normandy, the 80th anniversary is very important.
Patrick Hillier has heard the stories over the last 2 decades.
Well, the residents of Dangy had been under German occupation since June of 1940, so people here have been under, Nazi domination for 4 years. And most people knew somebody or had been affected directly by being arrested by the Nazi authorities and deported, obviously Jewish people and other people who were being persecuted by the Nazis. And if you had any links with the French resistance, then you were at risk of being arrested and severely punished as well. So it wasn't a nice place to be.
But that was about to change. Operation Overlord began on June 6, 1944. Nearly 160,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, including 73,000 Americans. And while that invasion became known by Day 1, D-Day, it actually lasted weeks, with more Allied soldiers arriving every day after, including one from Idaho. First Sergeant Virgil Lowell Brown.
He does not land until June 15th, so a week and a half after D-Day.
Kelly Smith teaches history at Thomas Jefferson Charter School in Caldwell. What do you like about history?
I'm always learning things.
Kelly first learned about Virgil's story about 10 years ago, when she and a former student were selected for a World War II research project.
And they chose us to go back east and research in Washington, D.C., and then the culminating thing was going to Normandy and finding the grave of the guy that we had researched, and it just so happened it was Virgil Lowell Brown.
Virgil, or Bud to his friends, grew up in Idaho Falls, the second of 5 kids and the only boy.
I just think the all-American guy, really.
After graduating from Idaho Falls High School, Virgil joined the Idaho National Guard and then enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1941. He arrived in England with the 183rd Field Artillery Battalion in 1943.
And he was only 22, and he had just gotten married, when they left.
6 weeks after that initial Normandy invasion, Allied advancement was showing signs of a stalemate, taking back only slivers of France at a time. By July 19th, they had liberated Saint-Lô, a little more than 20 miles from the coast. In order to break the deadlock, the Americans came up with Operation Cobra. On July 25th, an air attack by nearly 2,000 B-17s and B-24s dropped more than 3,000 tons of bombs, clearing the way for the Army's infantry and armored divisions. They took Saint-Gilles on the 26th, Marigny on the 27th. German opposition was minimal as they moved easily through Canisy, reaching Dangy by that afternoon, pushing the German Panzer Division further south. Just 4 kilometers in that direction sat the strategic town of Pompricard, critical for being a crossroads and having a bridge crossing the Soule River.
Just another artery way out of breaking out of Normandy.
The 183rd and Virgil arrived at Pompricard on July 28, 1944.
On that day, from what I've read, him and his men, they were heading towards Destination A and come across some Germans.
There were more than 250 of them. First Sergeant Virgil Brown had only about a dozen men with him.
Well, Virgil decided to pull him back, and they gathered what ammunition, they could and what guns they could, and then they pushed forward, and their main objective was a machine gun nest that was held by the Germans. So he organizes them and then charges the attack towards this machine gun nest. And in doing that, the initial wave, he was wounded, but then he continues onward towards the nest and helps disable it, and then is mortally wounded while doing that.
Virgil wasn't the only one.
A good chunk of those men didn't make it on that day in that particular sector.
His actions initially went unnoticed.
One big step forward towards liberating, ultimately Paris and then France.
But Virgil would be posthumously decorated with a Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor.
So he gets that award for his bravery, on that exact day that he lost his life.
However, that would not be the last honor bestowed on First Sergeant Virgil Brown. He, along with 4 others, will now be forever memorialized in the center of Dangy, the small village the 183rd helped liberate nearly 8 decades ago.
I thought it was just incredibly special, especially him being an Idahoan and just having a little connection that we did to him. It, again, just keeps that flame of his memory alive.
A generational reflection for the French, but a new memory for many Idahoans who may have not known before now.
Just to remember Virgil Lowell Brown and to remember that he's special and that he should never be forgotten.
Virgil is buried at the Normandy American Cemetery on the bluff overlooking the coast. And years ago, his family had the option of bringing him home to Idaho Falls, but they decided to leave him there with 4 members of his battalion that were also killed on July 28th of that year. The other Idahoan honored was Dangy, who was Boise-born Richard Clemens. Clemens, who was also in the 183rd, also helped liberate Dangy during Operation Cobra. But he survived, and his battalion fought for 11 more months across France and Belgium. He also participated in the grueling Battle of the Bulge. He returned to Boise in 1945 and settled down with his wife. Clemens retired from the Army, a full colonel, and passed away in 2013 at the age of 94. Of the 16 million Americans who served in the armed forces during World War II, there are fewer than 90,000 left. This is all according to the National World War II Museum. Most of them are more than 100 years old now. It's estimated that we lose 131 World War II veterans each day.
hot across the region today, and also we've got some thunderstorms in the mix, so things turning a little bit more stormy in this view of Twin Falls. You can see 80 degrees. We've dipped down from the high temperature of 89. Overall, radar looking somewhat active. We're not tracking one front in particular, but these are all kind of some spotty showers and thunderstorms that are popping up. More of that activity is going to be in the eastern Treasure Valley and towards the Magic Valley. You can see some of those a little bit stronger, producing lots of lightning and continuing to move to the northeast. And also along that same path, we're going to be seeing some storms trying to cross over the Owyhee Mountains, but I don't think much of them will hold together over the Owyhee Mountains, though it is still possible. So for Treasure Valley spots, we could see a couple of these storms make it over, but you can see overall, here is the area of dry air that we're now seeing getting pulled into all of these showers and storms. So where we've got the sunshine, there's a little bit more fuel for some of those storms, which is why this one is a little bit stronger. And you can also see some more of those storms popping up where the drier air is. That just means it's a little bit more, has a little bit more energy, more like a thunderstorm rather than a shower like we've been seeing over the mountains. So still some potential as we go into the evening for some gusty winds and some lightning. So keep that in mind as you make your plans. You can see for right now for those temperatures, we're roughly in the 80s in valley locations. And again, Magic Valley, we're in the 80s as well. And in the mountains, we're closer to the 60s and 70s. But we've actually dipped down in several areas, including the Magic Valley, where we were at 89 just not long ago. So some of that rain-cooled air now entering the area with some of those showers and thunderstorms. And Boise, again, 81 for the high today, but now the sun has come out. We've had a lot of the clouds for much of the day, so I wouldn't be too surprised if this number jumps up pretty quickly and we end up much warmer for our official high temperature for the day. The heat will be sticking around through the weekend and peaking on Saturday. So you can see Friday, we're expecting high of 93, high of 96 expected on Saturday, which is still close to the record that we have for that day. However, it is a little bit lower than what we talked about yesterday. So still definitely on the hot side and things staying hot while we still have some background chances of showers and thunderstorms. Tomorrow it's a little bit more favored towards the Idaho-Nevada border, but you can see lots of sunshine ahead and things looking very hot for your 7-day forecast.
Okie doke, folks. So we're having some technical issues with the big board. So I'm going to read some of your comments off the old lappy here. Kip in Boise writes, given Chad was found guilty of the horrific murders of his wife and Lori's 2 children and the others on death row, why in the world has execution become such a bureaucratic and lengthy process? Kip, it's a great question. Even as a convicted person, though, on death row, and I've seen a lot of questions about this, you still have civil rights in our country. So whether you're a convicted felon or not, you are still treated like a human being until the very end. Some other comments coming in. This one from Chris from Mountain Home. Our greatest thanks to all the veterans who honorably served. Yes, a great feature on D-Day here in 2024.